perform, as it should. When companies like Intel and AMD deliver their boxed processors with the factory included heatsink, what they will do to minimize, or to make the installation as easy as possible, they will pre-apply a phase change type thermal interface material to the bottom of the heatsink. I'm going to show you an example on the screen right now of what that looks like. As you can see in this example, there's like 3 bands of material, and it's a waxy type material. You don't want to touch it. You want to keep it protected until you actually install it, because you can damage it, with your finger. Once the processor is first powered up, that stuff will melt, and then it will ooze to where it covers the entire top of the processor. Now, with any thermal interface material, once you remove the heatsink, you have to take that thermal interface material and discard it. It has to be cleaned off. Usually you can clean it off with a paper towel. You can also, sometimes you need alcohol to help dissolve all of it. You want to clean it off the top of the processor and the bottom of the heatsink. Every time you reinstall a heatsink, you need to use new thermal interface material. And since, as an individual, I can't really get the phase change stuff, the only way you get that is pre-applied, we have to use what's called a thermal grease. Now, thermal grease usually comes in packages like this. Here's a package of what's called Arctic Silver, and this is enough for probably hundreds of applications. I couldn't, there's enough in here to install 100 heatsinks on 100 processors. Sometimes when you buy a heatsink, it will include a small amount of thermal interface material like this, a small little, this is good for, maybe 1 or 2 applications. They just give you enough that you can get it properly installed at least one time. Now, this stuff is a grease. Now, what are the differences between that phase change material and the grease? Well, the grease has a couple of problems that the phase change material doesn't have. One is called pump out, and the other is called dry out. Now, pump out refers to the fact that as the processor, as the heatsink sits on top of the processor, there is slight movement due to just different thermal coefficients of expansion, contraction, vibration, and eventually this movement kind of pushes the grease out. It kind of extrudes, it oozes out from between. So eventually, there's not an insufficient amount in there. The other thing that happens is it dries out. The grease has like a silicone, usually oil, to suspend the thermal material, and eventually it can dry out. So, those are some of the drawbacks of the grease, and that's why the manufacturers like to use the phase change material. Now, I've had people buy, processors that come with heatsinks and scrape the phase change material off, never even using it, thinking that the grease is better. Either one, performs pretty much the same thermally. In fact, I've seen numerous tests of, hundreds of different types of thermal interface material, and rarely see more than a 1-degree difference in the actual operating temperature of the processor, depending upon the different materials. It's just, it doesn't really matter. So people always ask me, what kind do you recommend? Do you recommend the Arctic Silver or, something else? I recommend whatever you have. Just use whatever you have. As long as it's properly applied, it's going to work properly. So, in this case, we've removed, I had already installed this heatsink once and had removed it. So now I need to reapply the thermal interface material to this processor. Now, in order to do that, I usually like to use a plastic or rubber glove in order to smooth the material out. So I'm going to put that on here. And I'm going to use this Arctic Silver material. And you're basically just going to put a blob of the stuff on the top of the processor. Not a whole lot, actually. Okay, now, once that's there, you want to use the glove and basically kind of smooth it out to where it covers most of the top of this heat spreader. Now, even if you don't get all of it, the entire heat spreader covered completely, it will ooze, around, especially as the force of the heatsink is